Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet today on this beautiful. Are we in summer yet, or is it still spring? I don't know. Summer now. Yeah, June. We're in summer day. Welcome. We've got quite a heavy agenda on for us today. But first of all, can I just ask Cabinet colleagues and other members to introduce themselves? So can I start?
Paul Jordan, Cabinet Member for Governance.
Brian Jones, Cabinet Member for County Operations.
Phil Murphy, Cabinet Member for Resources.
Bob Greenland, Deputy Leader, Responsibilities for Enterprise.
Richard John, Cabinet Member for Children and Young People.
Sarah James, Cabinet Member for Social Justice and Community Development.
Annie Jones, Cabinet Member for Social Services, Safeguarding and Health.
And can I invite opposition leaders to introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Jo Watkins, I'm Liberal Democrat leader.
Councillor Dimitri Petrini, leader of the Labour Group.
Debbie Blakeborough, leader of the Independents.
Okay, well, thank you. Welcome everybody. I'm Peter Fox, leader of the council. Can I first of all welcome both Jo and Debbie to your first cabinet meeting in your new respective roles. Can I congratulate you on being leaders of your groups, and can I also take the opportunity to thank Simon for his work as leader of the independent group for many years. He's done a really great job, and you know, I want to acknowledge that and wish you well in your role of leading the group as well going forward. So right, so we'll move on then into the agenda. Are there any apologies for absence? No, we're full on the cabinet front. So declarations of interest. This goes for all members in the room, and welcome again, Councillor Val Smith, a regular attendee. So any interests, please? No. If you find one as you work through, please, as usual, give it verbally and then fill in the appropriate pro forma. Okay, we'll move on then to item 3, and the first of 2 reports regarding 106, and it's the tier 2. No, how do you say that? Anyway, the 106 funding at Llanbiango, Crw Corney. Councillor Phil Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I was going to dodge that one as well. Just to say though that there's several Section 106 reports here. And Mike Moran's here, who no doubt will be able to answer any questions that might arise. The first one is seeking member approval for the off-site balances from that development in Llanbiango, Crw Corney, and to include it in the funding in the capital budget for 18-19, and recommending that the capital budget of 3,749 be created in that year to part fund the project with regards to play schemes, and that this is funded from corresponding contributions from the Section 106 balances to improve and provide further equipment at the play area adjoining Pandy Village Hall. The further contributions from this development should also be included in the capital budget as and when they're received. The recommendation is that this is done without further reference back to Cabinet, as this is a very straightforward scheme. And again, just to reiterate that it will be used towards the play area project and or any other recreational projects identified in the area of benefit. This planning permission and subsequently the agreement of the Section 106 contribution went through the Brecon Beacon National Park. And because each dwelling is being developed individually, the agreement provides for 4 individual payments of that 3,749, and then there's an additional 18,745 on the occupation of the 5th house. In close consultation with the Crw Corney Community Council, it's been determined that the main local priority is to expand and improve the children's fixed play position located on that area of land, which, as I said, is adjacent to Pandy Village Hall. So a relatively straightforward one Leader, the money gets passed to us. As I said earlier, it has been all sorted out through the BBNP, so it's up to us now to implement the agreement.
Thank you, Phil. And I note there in 2.3 then it's not like, it doesn't need to come back to Cabinet
No.
further. Right, okay. Mike, is there anything you want to add?
Only to say that I understand the correct pronunciation is Truly Hangle.
Can you say that again?
Truly Hangle.
Oh, right, okay.
Lancastrian, maybe slightly off.
Right, thank you for that. I'll practice that.
Take your word for it.
Okay then, so Cabinet colleagues, anybody got anything? No? Okay, pretty straightforward. A report then, so the recommendations in 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 that a capital budget of 3,749 be created in 2018-19 to part fund the following project, and that this is funded from corresponding contribution from the section 106 balances held by the County Council in respect of the development at Llanbiango Criccorni. And a grant in this amount is allocated to the Criccorni Community Council to improve and provide equipment at the play area adjoining Pandy Village Hall. Further contributions from the development be included in the capital budget as and when they are received without further reference back to Cabinet. Right, all in favour of those? Thanks very much. Thank you, Mike. And takes us on to the next similar report, and that is 106 again. Phil.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And this one's in respect of the Gavenny Gate development at Abergavenny, and it's recommending that we create a capital budget of 35,000 this time, again in 18-19. With the purpose of upgrading and improvement works to play areas in Llanfoist and Abergavenny. There's been inspections of some of the play areas in those areas, and it's been established that a number of these are in need of significant improvement and upgrading to ensure that they continue to offer safe play and a suitable environment for local children. So works are required to the play areas in School Lane, which is off Gypsy Lane, Llanfoist, Union Road, Abergavenny, and in Bailey Park itself. If the works to the above sites are not addressed quickly, then the condition of the play equipment and the general safety environment will get worse and clearly involve greater expense to the authority in the longer term. In terms of that funding, the council has received off-site play contribution of 35,000 from the Gavenny Gate development, and it's proposed to utilise this funding to carry out the works to the play areas concerned. So this is really to do some timely repairs to ensure the safety of those using the site.
Okay, thanks. Mike, anything further on? Oh, it's Nigel's report, isn't it? Sorry, Nigel. Anything you want to add, Nigel?
No, it's basically the three play areas will be upgraded with fencing, provision for fencing and safety servicing.
Yeah, great. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Colleagues, anybody wish to add anything? No, I'll move us straight then into the recommendation that a capital budget of 35,000 be created in 2018-19 to carry out upgrading and improvement works to play areas in Llanfoist and Abergavenny, and that this funding from a corresponding contribution from section 106 balances held by the County Council in respect of the Gavenny Gate development. Okay, all in favour of that? Thank you very much. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Mike. Okay, let's take us on to the next report. Very topical report at the moment. This is local government reform, green paper consultation. Many of you will be familiar with this consultation, which started back in March and is set to close on the 12th of June. Today gives us an opportunity as Cabinet to reflect on the green paper and consider the appended response from the administration. As you will know, this is the latest round of thinking from Wales Government, captured in the green paper from the current Cabinet Secretary on reform of local government. This is been met with some concern from many quarters across the local government family, because only last year we'd already embarked on what was then the latest reform agenda put forward by the previous Cabinet Secretary, Mark Drakeford, which was given a term of 10 years and for us to move forward on the regional agenda based on city region boundaries and local health board boundaries, and great work has been done in that regard. However, then the latest papers have been developed and have been come forward for consultation. The Green Paper calls for stronger, larger, more powerful local authorities and proposes merging the 22 local authorities into 10 new authorities. This would see Monmouthshire merging with Torvine and Blaenau Gwent. And the paper proposes 3 options, as you see highlighted in 3.5 there. Option 1 of voluntary mergers, option 2 a phased approach with early adopters of merging first, followed by the other authorities by 2026. And then option 3, a single comprehensive merger programme, all to be implemented by 2022. The Cabinet Secretary has outlined his proposed reforms at the WLJ Council in March, and it has to be said there was a strong rebuttal against that and strong challenge to the Green Paper coming forward once again. I think it's fair to say that there was unanimous support of all councils across Wales to reject the Green Paper, albeit there are elements of it we welcome, the increasing of extra responsibilities and powers, but part of the issue is they haven't been identified yet. So we don't really know what we would be looking to receive. And I think some of those key points for us have been captured very well in the appended statement, which I certainly would be keen for the administration to be to support as our contribution to the consultation. There are many things within the Green Paper which leads members across Wales to significant concern. As I mentioned earlier, we and Monmouthshire, but all local authorities have already embarked on the journey in line with the previous consultation on local government reform. Indeed, things like the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal were a platform to take that forward. In our corner, we already have a collaboration amongst 5 Gwent authorities in things like the School Improvement Service, but also conversations looking at wider collaboration together. And that's replicated around Wales in various corners and various groupings of councils. So we're already embarked on an agenda which would see a reform, but would preserve those things which are very important to us, like local accountability, local sovereignty, and those things which are quite special. Nobody's saying that 22 authorities is the right or the wrong answer, and this is one of the criticisms of the Green Paper. It does not give the evidence why a small authority isn't a viable authority or a sustainable authority. It makes a case for larger authorities. That clearly isn't the case. Merging organisations, creating big entities, it doesn't always work, as we've seen with health boards across Wales. So there are many things in there which are left unanswered. I attended with the Chief Executive a symposium on Monday with the Cabinet Secretary and all leaders from across Wales and Chief Executive to have a deeper debate around local government reform. And it would have to say that it wasn't the most productive meeting. It was useful to be able to come together and to share our views once again. But there clearly, in my mind, a lack of understanding at all levels, certainly in Wales government and perhaps in other areas, of what the degree of work which is already happening in the local government family, the collaborative approaches we're already adopting, the efficiencies and the things which are starting to be driven out of those, and the potential that could further be done. And so it was very clear that meeting wasn't productive. There was a clear view made to the Cabinet Secretary that form should not form should follow. Have I got it right? Function should. Function before form, and it's the other way around. They're creating form before function, and we've been through this 3 times or so in the last couple of years. This set of proposals within the Green Paper is very similar to a previous set of papers put forward by the Minister at that time, Leighton Andrews, which were subsequently turned down and weren't taken forward. Hence, we moved forward on the following Cabinet Secretary's proposals of that regional agenda, which local government had embraced and is working toward. Sadly, this Green Paper, all it seems to do at the moment is raise anxiety amongst many thousands of local government workers across Wales, to communities as well, and it has a potential to take councillors and councils' views off very important immediate issues of managing services with a shrinking resource. And that is not, that is not helpful. Also, the implementation of the Green Paper, if it were to come to fruition, would have devastating effects on some of those regional partnerships I'd already mentioned. For instance, what would it do to the Cardiff Capital Region City deal, where 10 authorities have come together and independently supported working agreements, transitional arrangements, financial implications, high-level business plans. All of those things took a long time to put in place. If you've got to reconstruct all of that or unpick it all for a new set of authorities, 2 or 3, how can we be reassured that all would sign up to that same long-term goal? What would be the implications of a city deal falling apart in our corner? With business losing faith in the region, with governments turning back on us because the threat of lack of stability going forward. So very clear in my mind and others across Wales that the implications to some of the things which are already in place are just too great to consider this regional Green Paper at the moment. However, we are going to have the conversations. As I said, there are strong, powerful and welcome sentences within it talking about additional powers and responsibilities. And we're anxious and welcome that. We're anxious to receive what those may be and welcome the opportunity to have a discussion around those. But at the moment, as I said, there is no evidence for what's being put forward. There is no deep rationale. There is no evidence which suggests the larger authorities are more resilient than a smaller authority. I think in the times prior to when the similar proposals were put forward, that was a time where there were 2 or 3 authorities struggling in some areas across Wales, and perhaps that was felt that that was a sign of lack of resilience. However, we know that since then those authorities have moved forward strongly and have recovered and are moving from strength to strength within a shrinking resource. So that contradicts some of that original argument. And so we don't believe that this is the right way forward for local government in Wales. That's not to say any authority, and there aren't any authorities who don't recognise we can do things differently going forward. hence why we'd moved on that agenda of collaboration. You know, many of us are looking for ways that we can deliver services in different ways, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to deliver certain services ourselves. We can do them in collaboration with others, but it's important that we stay accountable for those services, and we are responsible for commissioning those services, so we retain that sense of place and that sense of sovereignty and accountability. So members, we have before us, I hope you'll agree, a robust response to the consultation, to the Green Paper. It focuses on the areas we believe that are worthy of our contribution, or rather would benefit from our contribution. It is very much in line with the WLGA contribution, which was signed off or is being signed off as we speak. It's a very thorough, in-depth response, which addresses many of the things I've talked about, but is absolutely, our response is absolutely in line with that as well. I note that we were hoping perhaps that there would be some further contributions from the Democratic Services Committee, which met on Monday also, to feed into this process today. We understand there was a healthy debate within that committee. I haven't yet watched it on screen, but I understand that two of the members, the Labour members in the committee, made a strong case for merging authorities and moving away. But I think that was overshadowed by a larger number who felt this was wrong. In recognising I haven't got any alternative or any additions to move forward or to append to this response that we have before us, I'm minded to recommend that we do move this forward as the administration's response on behalf of this council. So, colleague, can I open it up to you?
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and I would absolutely concur with everything you've said and agreement with the response. I think what worries me more than anything else is that we are moving away from local accountability with such a proposal as is put forward. I actually believe that decisions should be taken as close to those people who are affected by those decisions as is possible. I would actually like to see further responsibilities given to town and community councils. And so this moves in the opposite direction as far as I can see. 10 years ago, it might have been true that there was some savings to be made by amalgamation of local authorities. But every local authority in Wales has now had to cut back to such an extent that if you think that there are any savings to be made by amalgamations, that is a false hope. We are running on very low at the moment, and amalgamations will give hardly any further savings. Certainly not savings which can be compared with the costs of such an amalgamation process. So it doesn't make any financial sense to me, and neither does the Welsh Government actually offer any figures that can be challenged in terms of savings. So you have to say, well, why are they doing this? Why haven't they decided to come forward, having just a few years ago say it's off the agenda for 10 years? Why have they now decided to come forward with these proposals? Call me cynical, but I actually believe it's got more to do with the Welsh Government's own desire for more assembly members. And they know that that will be an unpopular decision to make. They know that it will not go down well for the Welsh Government to put more money into assembly members. So they will counteract that by saying, well, we'll cut the number of councillors in Wales to pay for our extra assembly members. It may be that they need more assembly members, but if they need more assembly members, they should make the case for that and not simply look at the reduction of local democracy to pay for their additional members. And I actually do think that we need to have a review of the role of a modern councillor. we are asking a huge amount of especially our backbench members, who give a huge amount of their time. And it's not exactly a cash cow for people, which is why we find it difficult to get, and all parties I think would agree this, they find it difficult to get people to stand for council because of the time commitment that they have to give. So if you're going to make any changes, what are you going to do? Are you going to say, well, we'll have half the number of councillors, but we're going to pay them properly as a full-time job, in which case there's going to be no savings? Or are we simply going to do away with local democracy altogether? I think that this is a very ill thought out plan. And I frankly think that given that there is going to be a change in cabinet membership, no doubt, through having a new First Minister, I would be very surprised if this goes any further after the decision of to bring in a new First Minister. And I am heartily in favour of the response that we've made.
Thank you, Bob. Colleagues, Sarah?
Yeah, and I was just building on some of Bob's point, which I totally agree with. The Assembly at the moment is currently conducting an inquiry into diversity in local government, which seems quite at odds with what's being proposed in the Green Paper. The Green Paper is totally lacking in detail. I appreciate it is a Green Paper at this stage, and it doesn't really tell us what the Welsh Government wants to achieve from this whole project. What is the actual outcome? And I'm totally in support of what Bob said around this. Is around it feels like a centralisation agenda rather than at the moment we should be looking at active participation of our communities. We're doing a lot at a council level in terms of encouraging citizen engagement. I think by taking the approach that's in the Green Paper, then we severely could prevent that from happening in the future. I think this is something we need to be very, very concerned about. And I think the paper that's in front of us today adequately hits all those points and conveys the position very well.
Thank you, Sarah. Anybody else? Brian?
Yeah, I mean, there's almost no need to reiterate what you both have said up to now, the three of you have said up to now. I agree with it wholeheartedly, and I just find it so odd that on the one hand they're trying to, as you said, reduce the number of councillors and choke off local government while they can expand their bloated animal in Cardiff. So I just think, you know, it's awful, and I think we should just not give it the time of day.
Richard?
I agree with everything that's been said, and I won't reiterate those points, but I did want to expand a little bit further on what Sarah was saying, because one of the things I really like about Monmouthshire County Council is we're quite diverse compared to most local authorities in Wales. And we've got county councillors who are in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I can think of one local authority quite close to us in South East Wales that has hardly any any female councillors at all. The vast majority of county councillors are white men over the age of 65. And I think there are questions about whether that is representative democracy if everyone is from a certain section of society. I think if you're representing everyone in your local authority, then you need a broad representation amongst elected members. And I think this Welsh Government drive towards having fewer councillors, much larger wards, so a county councillor representing many thousands of residents, that's going to be a full-time job. And I think you're going to be looking at a return to the days when the vast majority of county councillors are retired and you're not going to get that broad range of experiences. I think that would be a really negative step, and you're going to create another tier of full-time professional politicians. And I think one of the benefits of being, particularly for backbenchers, of being a county councillor is that you don't have to give up your career. There are ways in which you can balance your career, and you don't have to suspend that for a period of 5 years to be a county councillor with no idea whether you're going to be successfully re-elected or not. So I think it's a really backward step, and we would be going back to the days where we don't have broad representation and we don't have equality amongst our elected representatives.
Thank you, Richard. Penny?
Well, it's just from a health and social services point of view. This green paper seems to be ignoring all the work that is going on in other areas. For instance, the parliamentary review is ongoing, and an incredible amount of work has been done about, with regional partnership boards, for instance. And when the minister was asked about, the two ministers were asked about the effects of this green paper, that they just said it would not be good. I mean, they were quite contrite, but they tended to kick it aside. So I don't think there's a lot of support within the actual cabinet in the Assembly for it. So that is something perhaps in our favour. But I don't think, too, that the work such as parliamentary review has been taken into account at all, and the effects that this would have on it.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. Phil?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. There's a lot of aspects to this which have all been brought out. The financial ones, of course, are the sheer weight of problems associated with rationalising council tax rates, which would cause enormous problems throughout the authorities, and of course the scheme. I know in the Leighton Andrews days we were talking about some 350 million, and there's all sorts of costs associated with different schemes coming forward. Wouldn't it be lovely if they actually invested that money in local authorities to enable us to get on with the job properly, even if it's to put into adult services to save the burden on the NHS.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah.
It's all been said before, but the question that we should ask: what's the rationale behind the decision of the Welsh Government to move this forward? And from my point of view, it's a power grab from the central government and ignoring the people in the constituencies.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. So, and I think one of the things that the Cabinet Secretary said at the symposium on Monday was he felt that the relationship between Wales Government and local government wasn't good, and we needed to, that needs to be addressed. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I went to Stuttgart and looked at the way that the various tiers of local government work together and mutually respect each other. And it was really impressive how subsidiarity is generally practiced and believed in countries. And the trouble is here, we aren't seeing that respect agenda for what local government is doing doesn't seem to be in place at the moment. And actually, I think the relationships between local government and Wales government have widened as a result of this debate at the moment, because it is not come at it's not come at a time where we can afford this debate. We are already embarked on a journey, as I shared before. There are some other key implications. The Boundary Commission would have a huge amount of work to do. Could they possibly get that work done in time? Very, very doubtful. There is a whole range of harmonisation issues which would have to take place. I have nothing against Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent. We work very closely together as part of a Gwent or a Gwent collaboration in many ways, and I get on very well with the leaders of those organisations. However, they feel as strongly as I do that they believe in their own sense of place. They believe in their county, and I believe in Monmouthshire, and I am not going to be part of selling Monmouthshire down the river. I've said that before. This is an important place. It's a wonderful place, and there should be local accountability and local sovereignty, and long may that last. That's not to say we can't do things in different ways, working together for a collective good, more efficiencies, driving forward. So, members, if you're happy, we will move. Sorry.
So that Right, okay.
So we move the recommendation is, and Matthew, author of the report on our behalf. Thank you very much for that. Is there anything you wish to add? You've been obviously close to some of the debate on this.
Yeah, nothing to add to that, Leader. I guess only to emphasise, I suppose, in that the meeting at Democratic Services Committee on Monday couldn't reach a consensus, so that the recommendation currently says a council response, whereas what we're now looking at is an administration response.
Yeah. So I recognise there were only 9 members turned up for Democratic Services Committee. It wasn't all party invite, but there were 6 members of the Democratic Services Committee there. So it was a constituted and quorate committee. You know, it did its business. As I understand it, there were only a couple of people who were speaking loudly for merger, and the rest were, you know, hadn't made up their mind, as you said, Matthew, and we were perhaps expecting some to come today, but that hasn't happened.
Can I just come in there a minute? Because if we were having this debate in council and we had a majority decision, that would be a council response, regardless of the fact that a couple of people did not agree with it. Why therefore can't this go in not just as an administration response, but a council response?
I would say, Bob, that the administration is the council, isn't it? I mean,
so it can go in as a council response.
Well, whichever wording, I don't really mind. It can go from the administration. The administration is the leading group on the council, and so it becomes the council's response. It's just terminology, really. So, you know.
If I could assist, Leader, I think that's right. But furthermore, if any elected members have a contrary view to the response that the council is now going to put in, then of course they have the opportunity to do so. And who knows, some may have done already. But I think it closes on the 12th of June. If individual members want to put their own view across, then I'm sure the Welsh Government would welcome that.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. And I know they do. So any groups who feel they can't conform with this position, they can put their own group and views forward. Okay, so the recommendations before us then are to consider the draft response attached to Appendix 1 and suggest any additions, deletions, where consensus can be reached. I think we're all unanimously supportive of it as written, and subject to any amendments agreed to during the meeting, to endorse the draft response to the consultation on behalf of the council by the deadline, which we are aiming to do. So all in favour of those? Great, thank you very much. Thanks again, Matt. Okay, can we move on then to the next item, which is, get there, this transfer of the assessment for free school meals to the shared benefit service. Richard.
Thank you very much. So this report proposes to transfer the assessment of free school meals to the shared benefit service between us and Torfaen County Borough Council for a 2-year period from the 1st of September this year. This is something that Torfaen undertook last year, and they saw a 20% increase in the uptake of free school meals. Half of that was attributed to the introduction of universal credit, something that's being rolled out in Monmouthshire this month. But we still feel that there could be a significant benefit for children and young people in our local authority. We know how important it is that children and young people are in a position to learn, and having had a balanced, healthy, nutritious lunch while in school is key to that. We estimate there will be some benefits in terms of funding. The pupil development grant won't automatically get an increase in children on their rolls who are entitled to free school meals, because the way that grant is distributed is currently based on 2017 pupil numbers, but that may change in the future. There are a number of reasons why families who are eligible for free school meals may not take up those lunches, perhaps due to low awareness, pride, or perhaps fear of a stigma, despite the fact that all our schools have processes in place to ensure that pupils who claim free school meals are not identified to their peers, and that's really important. There are some costs associated with this proposal, about £15,500 to Torfaen County Borough Council. as the charge for providing this service. There will be the cost of providing additional lunches, but we really feel that the benefits in terms of well-being of young people, particularly those from poorer backgrounds, having the free school lunches that they should be entitled to are significant. So we feel this is a really important move. We feel there are significant benefits to young people, particularly those from the poorest parts of Monmouthshire. And we look forward to this beginning on the 1st of September. And as I say, it'll be for a 2-year period. And we will assess the benefits that we've had, and we'd really encourage families to take up the entitlement that they have of free school meals for their children.
Thank you, Richard. And I, for one, I'm sure we'll all agree in this room, I don't mind incurring extra expense if that identifies more people who are eligible coming forward. I think that'd be a great step forward. Colleagues, anybody wish to add anything?
It should actually pay for itself, Leader.
Yeah, I think this is a good news story. I think nationally there are many, many benefits that aren't claimed for. Millions of pounds go unclaimed. And what anything we can do to ensure that people who are entitled to benefits receive those benefits can only be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I haven't got any insight to add or anything particularly helpful other than to say that I totally support this, and I look forward to working with Richard around this issue, because clearly anything that we can do to reduce the cost on families where there are challenges for those families, then obviously that's a good thing. And if there are costs, then I think the benefits are very much likely to outweigh those in terms of what this could bring to greater awareness and take it.
Again, evidence where we've already got a strong working relationship with a neighbouring authority.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, the recommendations then are as written in 2 there, to agree the proposal to transfer the assessment of free school meals to the shared benefit service for a 2-year period from 1st of September, and to agree the cost of this is £15,500 per annum. This will be paid to the Ryan County Borough Council for the provision of the service, and this will be funded by an existing vacancy. All in favour of that? Thanks very much. Okay, and that moves us on to the corporate parenting strategy. Penny.
Thank you, Chair. This is a revised corporate parent strategy and action plan 2018 to 2021. As you are aware, responsibility for our looked after children does not sit with the Children's Services alone, but with every elected member and every directorate within the council has a special responsibility towards those most vulnerable of children and young people, to value and respect them and to keep them at the forefront of our minds, exactly as if they were our own. So it applies to everyone, but not just members, officers as well. It is a collective responsibility across services and across local authorities to safeguard and promote the life chances of looked after children. And this extends during their period of being looked after and into their lives as young adults striving towards independence. This means that all of us should know what the key issues and concerns are of our looked after children, and to ensure that the council is responding to these. Ensure that parental responsibility for LACs are being fulfilled, identify where things need to improve and to make a difference for good, and to consider and question the impact of council decisions on looked after children and care leavers. The strategy proposes 9 priority areas as a way of articulating its current aspirations for looked after children and care leavers. And this is on page 3 of the strategy, as you can see. I won't go into all of them, but they are specifically for looked after children. This is a second iteration of the strategy and an overview of some of the progress that was made during the preceding period, as well as some of the barriers and challenges as seen on pages 10 and 11. Key differences within this revised strategy include the additional focus on care leavers. Up to now, it has been up to a point of 16 years of age, 18, but certainly not afterwards. A reflection of the current campaign to increase in-house care, and an update of the current data and information set that underpins the strategy. The Corporate Parenting Panel, which I chair, assists the Council to fulfil its corporate parenting responsibilities. The panel works to the action plan, which you will see towards the end of the strategy, and monitors progress towards its aims through the data set and contained within. So it's continuous monitoring of this action plan throughout the panel. Membership and terms of reference for the panel are also appended. One of our first priorities for this period is to secure increased participation and engagement with children, young people and their carers. We're planning to kickstart this with 2 celebration events. The first is a heartfelt thank you to our carers and foster carers at Caldicot Castle, which will be held later this month, followed by, where also I must say they will receive certificates and bunches of flowers and just a recognition of the work they do. So a bit of a fun, informal element. And later on, we hope to do the same for our looked after children, which will probably be at Hillston Park. And that again will be a fun day probably in September. Again, in recognition of the achievement of what they've achieved, and they too will have certificates. Your support and involvement in these events, by the way, would be very welcome. A reminder that all elected members are expected to attend the introduction to corporate parenting as well. So I don't know if Cabinet want to talk about how this might be implemented in the future to ensure that all members take part in this induction procedure. This strategy will now go to full council, and the performance will be scrutinised by Select following the next corporate parenting panel where it comes to the panel. So as I say, it will go to Select first, but it will look, performance goes to Select, but this actual strategy goes to full council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Penny. Really welcome this. You know, we can never forget that we are corporate parents, all of us, and that you know, our young people in our care, we need to think of those in the same way we think of our own children at home. That's really important. So it's important we have a robust corporate parenting panel. I'm really pleased with the membership on that. You know, it's great we have foster carers on that. We put that in place a couple of years ago, and you know, I got to take your hat off to the foster carers we have. The work they do is brilliant, and it's challenging at times for them, but they're a wonderful group of people, and so I'm pleased that you're putting on some events. I'd be very happy to come and support those. Your question on induction to corporate parenting, I assumed that we've already had an induction last year. Yes, on that, because I would be very disappointed if we hadn't.
We have.
Yeah,
we have, but it's ongoing. Yeah. I mean, we must think of the future inductions as well. Yeah, okay. That it must be an integral part of it because it is so important.
Yeah, Claire, you'll be able to answer this, I'm sure. Isn't there, or Rob, you may be, isn't there a responsibility that we need to, there should be at least 2 reports back to council or cabinet in a year on corporate parenting, or maybe council? It's just something sticks in my mind from previous, because I don't think you can have too many reminders of our responsibilities in this regard.
Yeah, I think that's right, Leader, and I think it's reported to council, because don't forget this this policy strategy is it's a decision for approval by council. Yeah. So I think the reporting mechanism does go back to council. Yeah, but I can check on that.
Yeah, just mindful that we you know, we have a lot of new members in the council, and reminding them of their responsibility and what that actually requires of them would be useful. The strategy is great. Strategy is good, and the actions there. And this is coming for a scrutiny committee as well.
Yes,
isn't it?
Performance is being looked at next corporate panel, and then it will come to Select to be seen. The performance will be scrutinised at Select.
Can I bring Claire in now before I invite other members?
Yeah, just a couple of points in terms of the corporate parenting training for all members. That was part of the induction programme, but we do need to arrange some further training, because as with all parts of the induction programme, not all members attended the training. So we do need to make sure that all members understand their responsibilities around corporate parenting. An earlier version of this strategy did go through select committee and was informed by the comments from select committee, but in terms of, as the cabinet member has said, as that ongoing performance monitoring, select will look at that on a quarterly basis, coming out of the work of the corporate parenting panel as we make progress on all of those key indicators, a number of which are reflected in our national performance measures as well, around particularly housing and accommodation, and needs of care leavers in education, employment and training.
Okay, thanks for that, Claire. Right, Bob?
Yeah, just a few questions, if I may. First of all, I'm looking at the breakdown by legal status, and first of all, the numbers, or the increase in numbers over the 5-year period 13 to 2018, from 101 to 139, nearly 40% increase in those numbers. That's and I suspect it's not just Monmouthshire, but it's other councils as well. But full care orders have increased from 27 to 110 over the 5-year periods, whilst admittedly some of that has allowed for a reduction in placement orders from 50 to 4. But perhaps you could explain why all those numbers have changed so much. And then in the breakdown by type of placement, I'm a little confused at the difference between, well, I can guess the difference between generic and kinship fostering, but then we've got in-depth fostering, in-depth living, residential, which again seems to have increased from 6 to 11 over the 5-year period, and then other LACs, which seem to have gone from 4 to 29 over the same 5-year period. So there's quite a variation in those figures there. But the other question I wanted to ask really was on outcomes in terms of employment for those children who have been in care. And we have some figures in the report which tell us how many of these children were in, I think it was in education or training 3 years after. But how does that compare with the situation maybe 3 years ago? In other words, are we getting better at our care so that more of our children are getting jobs later on? And how do we compare with other local authorities? It's just to give us an idea about how good our service is compared with others and whether we're moving on.
Right, shall I start off and then perhaps you can come in if I can remember all those questions. The first one, the numbers, you're right, it isn't just Monmouthshire, it's across the UK, as was put on the national news not long ago. It is a problem that's affecting everybody. Why so many? I don't think anybody really knows, but there are lots of contributory factors, for instance, immigration, sexual exploitation, perhaps not all least for Monmouthshire. I'm just going on a generic, giving a generic answer. And general poverty, people at austerity, yes, and below the poverty line of certain numbers, which can cause angst and problems within families. The question about, so there are a lot of reasons. I don't think anybody has the full answer. When I certainly watched a news item on it, nobody seemed to have a definitive answer, but I'm sure Claire will come in on that a bit more. What was the other one you asked me there about? Full care orders? In Monmouthshire, certainly, part of this is, I have to be quite careful here how I word this, I think, but part of this is the legal system that we have actually in process at the moment. The judges concerned are very keen to provide a full care order as opposed to involving the family. They feel that once a child has come that far, then it is probably best that they're not in the family, stay with the family and kinship, etc. So that has increased our numbers, without doubt. That has increased our adoption numbers as well in Gwent. So that could be part of the factor. What else? Independent fostering, independent living. I think that independent fostering is independent agencies that we're talking about so much when we're trying to get people to go into Monmouthshire foster care homes. So and independent living is encouraging those who are perhaps older to live independently. What was the other one? Oh, yes, I did send you, because it was sent to me by Jane Rogers, the performance indicators, which showed you the actual comparisons with previous year of those percentage of all care leavers who are in education, training or employment 12 months after leaving care, which was 69.2%, or 9 out of 13. And the percentage of care leavers who are in education, training or employment after 24 months is 72.73, or 8 out of 11. And then the percentage of care leavers who have experienced homelessness is 9.4, or 5 out of 53. Now, the performance indicators they're going to be monitored at our next meeting, which is next week, the corporate parenting. It is then going to select, and then report will come back to you. So that is all I have at the moment, but I will certainly ensure that we'll have comparisons with other local authorities in that.
Yes, other local authorities and our figures from the past, so that we can see whether we're
we've got
getting better at
2016,
putting
17,
these
yeah.
children into employment or not.
Well, sorry, yes, okay, I'll just give the 12 months then. It was 63.64 last percent in 16-17, and it's now 69.2 for 17-18. Percentage of care leavers after 24 months in education, training or employment in 16-17 was 50%, and it's now 72.73%, 17-18. So we have in fact done better, but the figures will be updated and I'll know more detail.
Okay, thanks, Penny. Claire, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just to build on what the cabinet member has said in terms of working backwards, really, care leavers in education, training and employment. The figures which cabinet member has just given place us in the top quartile for after 12 months. And the middle quartile in terms of all of Wales for after 24 months. So, in terms of comparators with other authorities, we are performing well. We can always still do better. And I would say over the last year and a half, particularly the relationship between children's services and colleagues within Youth Enterprise has really improved in terms of the pathways through for our children who are looking for apprenticeships, who are not in education, not neat children, I use the vernacular, and making sure that all of them have got plans and accessing the training that they're needing to in order to work through, and some real success stories coming through that. And we funded a post which is based in Youth Enterprise in order to really make sure we've got the right people with the right skill set and connections supporting our key care leaders into education, training and employment. In terms of the numbers of looked after children, the cabinet member has already said that this is an issue not just in Monmouthshire but across the whole of Wales, England particularly. The devil is always in the detail. In terms of those numbers, there are an increasing numbers of children who are on placement orders but actually living at home with their own parents. That's that other category. And that's as a consequence of the sort of practice of the judiciary in terms of management of risk through a placement order, rather than we manage the risk through a care and support plan and support that family. So there's an increasing number of children who have that looked after status who actually live at home with their own parents, and that contributes to the numbers that you see. The challenge that we've got in those figures really for us, which has been a key priority for us and is part of our corporate plan, is that balance when children are in foster care between how many we support in in-house fostering and are supported in independent fostering. And our priority and the council's priority is to grow that in-house fostering resource. And we are having some success at the moment in terms of numbers in assessment. That hasn't yet come through into actual numbers that you see in the report, but will be a key indicator which will be monitored through the rest of the year as well.
So where a young person has a care order but then live in that home, what's the process for them to integrate full back, so that order's lifted and they move back into ordinary family life?
That number of care leavers, of looked after children isn't static. It's quite a sort of revolving number. So we do work through and go into court routinely to revoke the care orders if and when we're able to do that and to manage risk. But there will be a of children who will remain living with their own families who will be on those care orders throughout their childhood, and that's the reality which we're working with in terms of managing the risk. It's also interesting that there's increased numbers of children who are on care orders who live with other family members, those kinship carers, and all of this brings a resource requirement on us as an authority in terms of reviews, in terms of social work, in terms of support into those families and our responsibilities right through into care leavers. So when we look at those numbers, it's the individual children, but the implications for us as an authority of those increased numbers of children for which we have corporate parenting responsibilities are considerable from where we were a number of years ago.
Thanks, Claire. That's really helpful.
Could I just help with Councillor Greenham? You asked about those full care order numbers. Don't forget that those are sort of aggregate figures. So care orders can last until the child is 18. So those figures won't necessarily be new care order applications each year. The important one to have a look at on that is the interim care order applications that we're making. So that full care order, that figure, that 110, is the total number of care orders, but those are the total number of care orders we had pre-March 13, so there's some included in there. And just on how this is reviewed, it's at the bottom of page 11, Leader, in that the panel is to prepare an annual report to full council, the corporate parenting panel. So they do that each year as a way to review how this strategy is working.
And to select.
I know years gone by, we used to present cabinet member reports twice a year on it as well. It's just to keep it. So it's just worth us considering how we keep it in members' mind's eye. Okay. So
Can I just ask a question? Paul? So just for clarification, if we're looking at the interim care orders from 2016 to date, we're in fact reducing the number of interim care orders, and that the full care orders, the cumulative total of all those children in care is 110. Is that the correct understanding?
Yes.
Page 8.
Yeah, that's page 8, yeah. That's how she's put it, that
The looked after children, sorry, this is quite technical now, aren't necessarily only those children on full care orders. So the figure of looked after children will be greater, but the number of children that we have on full care orders as of March 18 is 110.
Yeah, good.
There's another figure there which is of interest, right? It's section 76, and you can see that figure has gone down. Section 76 used to be called section 20 voluntary accommodation, but the judiciary now, not just in this area, in England and Wales, frown upon the use of looked at voluntary accommodation. Okay, so there isn't a rule of thumb as such, but voluntary accommodation shouldn't last any longer than 12 weeks. Okay, and it's all about giving the child a voice and giving the child a voice in court. So that's the reason why that figure's going down.
So in simple terms, if you're looking at the section 76 orders and the interim care orders, the situation is improving because there are fewer children being subject to those orders. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, that's right, but that's part of the story. Yeah, that's right.
No, I see that.
Okay. The demands on children's services are still
okay.
And on legal services as a consequence. I mean, our number of looked after children today is 138, so our numbers are relatively stable. They've still increased significantly over the last number of years, but compared to other areas which have seen an even more significant increase, we are stabilising within the 130s.
In my time in this council, a figure of between sort of 70 and 100 has been a constant. It's these last sort of 5 years we've seen this increase over. I remember one year we had 19 refugees which showed up in Chepstow, which suddenly increased the number of looked after children, albeit some of those will have to be looked after in other authorities. We were the host, we were the authority. Sorry, Paul, one last.
Just again, clarification. We see in page 9 that more children are placed in with foster carers working for independent fostering agencies. We heard that you're seeking to improve the position. What are we doing to encourage more Monmouthshire foster carers to look after children as opposed to fostering agencies? Is it to do with the amount of money that we pay the foster carers or otherwise?
Well, we've just had a foster carer fortnight, and we've had lots of events going on in different towns. And when I visited Bridges last week, I think, which was a culmination of the fortnight, they'd in fact interviewed 17 potential new families to become foster carers. Now, not all of them are going to be suitable because not all of them had a spare room, but there was certainly, you know, it had worked in that we got people coming in and talking. So that's one of the things that we do. As for the money, well,
yeah, there's the marketing aspect, and you know, foster care fortnight generated a lot of activity, a lot of interest, and you know, the marketing campaign I think has been very sophisticated and effective in terms of generating interest over the last while. Then there's probably 3 other things which are really important. One is the speed of response to those inquiries. We need to filter out the people who aren't suitable very quickly, and then to take those through who are potentially suitable as quickly as possible. The next is the whole offer, and that includes the financial remuneration as well as the training and support that we give to foster carers. And all of that needs to come together in order for us to operate in a market, and it's a very crowded market in terms of independent foster agencies, other local authorities, and sometimes Monmouthshire residents foster for other authorities neighbouring to us. And for us to hold our own within that market, we need to be really sophisticated in terms of the way we work, not just from the marketing side, but from all of those aspects. So there's been a fostering project for the last 2 years. I would say it's been pretty slow to deliver results other than in the marketing aspect, but probably over about the last 6 months or so, it's really started to motor, and that's why we've got some you know, significant numbers now, 9 in generic assessment, but then it still takes further time for them to get through that assessment process and into a position where they're actually taking children through. Yeah. So it's been a bit slow burn. We're exploring options such as further integration with regional partners as well to see what we could do more effectively on that regional footprint, because this is a critical issue for us, not just from a service point of view, but from a financial point of view as well, because of the differential between the rates for independent fostering agencies and in-house foster care.
Okay, thank you.
And it's all, Chair, can I just say, it's also quite interesting, we have had return to foster carers, not in great numbers at this point, but we have had return from independent back to Monmouthshire because they feel that it's a better package, that they're more, although not in terms of finance, but in terms of being looked after and having support. So that's an interesting issue to look at. Provision of support.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Penny. Thank you, Claire. Okay, I'm going to move to the recommendations then, and that's in 2. It's recommended that we note the content and intentions of the corporate strategy and its action plan, note the membership in terms of reference of the corporate parenting panel, and consider the implications for all elected members and the wider council. All in favour of receiving those? Thank you very much. Okay, can we now move on to the revenue and capital monitoring outturn statement? Phil.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And Mark and Peter are here to fill in on any questions that we might have. This is the report of the month 12 position with regards to revenue and capital outturn. It will do the rounds of select committees now, and they will have and do have in the report a considerable amount of detail, and again that's been allocated according to scrutiny committee areas of interest to make it easier for them to concentrate on what they're doing. As you'll see in 2.1, for the recommendations, we're asked to consider the net revenue outturn underspend of 653,000, which is an improvement of 694,000 on the period 2 to month 7 outturn predictions. And I'll go on to say how we propose to allocate that in a minute. And I want to take this opportunity of congratulating officers on a considerable achievement here. There's no guarantee that we will do it next year, of course, but every effort will be made as usual. We're also asked to consider the capital outturn spend of 46.8 million against the revised budget of 47.2, which takes into account the slippage of 11.8 million. And there'll be a result in underspend there, net underspend of 395,000. So the use of reserve proposed is also reflected in 371, where projects are started but progressing and will be delivered during the current year. And that table of 371 shows the slippage according to a number of categories, and I'm sure Selects will have a look at that. So as regards the allocation of the 653,000, it's proposed that 155,000 tops up the priority investment fund, 50,000 to the capital receipts regeneration reserve, and the balance of 448,000 to the invest to redesign reserves. This is because the low level of earmark reserves will notably reduce the flexibility of the council, that the council flexibility has, excuse me, in meeting the challenges of the scarce resources going forward. And we've all seen tables over some considerable time now of how the earmark reserves are depleting, although we are still managing to hold the general reserve within the recognised limits. Members will also note the extent of movements on individual school balances, and there's tables there showing them on a school-by-school basis, and that places emphasis on the schools to review the extent that recovery plans can be delivered over shortened timescales, and appreciates the net user balances of only 94,000 in this year, whereas the original budget intention of schools was to draw on balances by 877,000. So that was quite a change from what was anticipated. If you go to 312, it shows there the under and overspends, and clearly we need to be looking at the children's services, and I'm sure that Penny and Claire will have something to say about that. There's always a lot of pressure in children's services, and again there's a far more detailed explanation within the section that deals with the scrutiny committee's areas. Fortunately, a lot of sections came under budget, and that has helped to compensate not just within social services but within the authority in general. And another one which stands out is operations, and a lot of that had to do with the bad winter and additional costs that we incurred there. So a good result in that we did manage to come up with a surplus in the end, Leader. A much needed top up to reserves, but at that stage I'll leave it to see whether any other cabinet members have got questions prior to it going out to the scrutiny process.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. And can I also share my thanks to all budget managers for doing a sterling job. Difficult times, it's always difficult, I know. So the collective position, the outturn is good, it's positive, but we know that can mask real pressures and challenges in some areas, and you've highlighted one of those. Children's services. I know it's an area we'll need to understand deeply moving forward, and there will be other areas as well, because the need for accurate budget monitoring is going to be fundamental to meet budget targets going forward. We can't always rely on underspends coming in as they are. It's getting more and more difficult. But a comprehensive report, and happy to support the recommendations within it. Mark or Peter, anybody want to add anything at this point? Mark?
Other than the fact, an observation really, I mean, what I would remind members is that this budget forecast report is a management tool to actually designed to introduce change.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I feel a bit of a charlatan coming through the year saying this is a very hard year, proposing a deficit, and at the end of the year managing to scrape under the line. Yeah. It's largely as a consequence of your consideration of this budget and SLTs that some of these changes are made to introduce such a positive effect at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that, Mark. There is there's a collective effort right across the organisation to make sure that we come in and that's work, Pete. Sorry.
Yeah, just one other further point really, which is again just echoing the comments really in terms of the efforts that have been made to bring us a positive end to the position. Important to just touch on the fact that at the next cabinet meeting we'll be looking to bring a report that will provide some comfort and reassurance around our budget savings plans for 18-19, an early indication, and then certainly then after the summer recess we'll see our first stage monitoring for 18-19. I know cabinet, executive, the administration in fact welcomes that sort of comfort and reassurance that early on in the year.
Oh, definitely, and we do welcome that. It's so important that's in place. So look forward to that, because it won't be many minutes before we start looking at the following year's budget. This is usually around September, October, but we've already, we start getting engaged in some of that early thinking. I know. Okay, colleagues, anybody wish to add? No? Any officers wish to add? Paul?
I guess what I'd say from my perspective, the key table in the whole report is table 316, because I think it gives a sense of performance over time, and I think increasingly we need to view excellence as being consistent performance over time. I think if we were reporting to you in any given year a surplus of £3 or £4 million or a deficit of £3 or £4 million, I'd be really concerned about the efficacy of the decision-making process here. Yeah. Because it would suggest to me that we've either asked members to consider decisions that they didn't need to make, or we haven't asked members to consider decisions that they needed to make. So I guess when you look at a surplus of £652,000, it's about, give or take, 0.4% of our budget, and across the 4-year period, pretty much that's where your outturn is. And I would emphasise the point I think that Councillor Murphy and the leader have made. There is no luck that comes into this. You don't get lucky at that level. In fact, if we trailed this back to 13, 14, 30 and the years before, from memory, I think we'd find similar figures. And I think we try to deliver the budget that you've set without compromising the policy positions that you've taken. And why I emphasise that last point is that you will see, as you will always see in a genuinely complex business model, running a council is not complicated, it is complex. They are different things. We could take the approach of brutalising children's services during the course of the year and hammering it to come back to a zero. But actually we don't believe that's the policy intent of this organisation. So the whole organisation tries to respond to challenges to one of the key policy platforms. But I go back to where I started. If we're hanging around half of a percentage point year in, year out, that suggests to me that there's some good work is going on consistently.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. As I said, I think it's going to be important that as we move forward, we get a close insight into the things like children's services, you know, and identifying is there a core pressure there, which isn't just you know, the changing dynamic of everyday social care, because you know that's a fundamental consideration we need to consider moving forward when we start allocating funding going forward. So I think we need to really understand the depths of some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting changes this year is that whilst Children's Services is quite volatile, within social care itself, it actually delivered a better bottom line out than anticipated at month 7. So it actually consumed its own scope in terms of the pressures of the budget.
Absolutely. Any last points, anybody? Okay, right, I'm going to take us then to the well, I'm not going to read all of these recommendations. Now I'm going to take us, you feel you work through these as you work through this and you're in opening. So I'm going to move the recommendations on block, which are written there at 2.1 through to 2.6. Are we all in favour? Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move then on to let's get there, the Welsh Church Fund. I'll introduce this briefly. It's a regular report to receive the schedule of applications for the Welsh Church Fund meeting, which happened on the 19th of April. And there was a second meeting scheduled, but as you can see, that was cancelled. So the applications considered are there in 2.1. And I'm not going to read through each one of those. You can see those. I move we receive we resolve that the following grants be awarded as per the schedule of applications. Anybody got anything they want to raise?
Can I just check something with Rob, Leader? I just signed the form for the current one, so I don't need to declare an interest, do I?
That's absolutely fine, Councillor Murphy. Yeah, it's just a process we have here in the council, whereas if an application is made, the local member, the local county councillor signs off that form.
And
that's fine. If that's the extent of your involvement, no interest required to be declared.
Worth noting that all members, if you sign one, which we're all asked to do now and again, it doesn't give you an interest.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, thank you for that. So the recommendation then is, as I just shared, so 2.1, all in favour? Thank you very much. Okay. Right, we're going to now move to the alternative delivery model and update on progression. Bob.
Yes, thank you, Leader. All members are aware that we are moving rapidly in the work that we're doing towards the point at which Council will be asked to approve or not the move into the alternative delivery model for our tourism, leisure, culture and youth services. This is an update report really, but at this time we do need to ask for some, well, we'll be giving some further updates in the report and asking for approval for some money as well. Probably easier if I go through the recommendations. At the point we are at the moment, we really need to begin to separate, in terms of moving forward, the role of the council to the role of the ADM. And to do that, we need to identify officers who will be leading on behalf of the council and officers who will be leading on part of the ADM. So 2.1 mentions the lead council team, and 2 officers have been nominated to do that. One is Peter Davis, who is our Chief Officer for Resources, and the other one is Kath Fallon, Head of Enterprise and Community Delivery. Now, both officers are well qualified to take these roles because they've both been involved heavily in the formation of CSC Foundry, which was the first project for the City Deal. So we're going to set up the council team led by them, and we will need a budget to cover things like legal fees, council costs, and it's proposed that this should come from the priority investment reserve, and so we're asking for £30,000 for that. We also have put names to the ADM lead team. 6 officers you'll see in the report are mentioned there are to be led by Ian Saunders. 2.4 of the recommendation is referring to the draft heads of terms, the draft articles of association for the TECL charity, TECL and trading companies and charity. And there are also lots of guidance notes there from our consultants, Anthony Collins. And those are there, and they, over the coming months, much of the work of going through this will be done by either the audit committee or the economy and development committee. But there is also a need for all members to take note of what is proposed in terms of the makeup of the membership of the boards and other issues which we want to ensure is fully understood by members before we get to the point at which we are asked to take a final decision in council. So we will need to establish quite how members are going to be given that information and given the opportunity to comment on the proposals that are shown in all the appendices that are following. But for the moment, all we're looking to do is to move those draft heads of terms, etc., forward for consideration by the audit and by the economy and development boards. We will also need to consider the formation of shadow company boards. And so we need to think about recruitment for these now. And in particular, I would suggest the first person that we need to be considering is to identify a chairman for these for the ADM going forward. So that needs to be done as soon as we possibly can. And then in 2.6, we need to start submitting the legal incorporation documents. Again, it's ahead of course of the formal approval or not by the council, but these things take a long time, well, as does any legal work in fairness. It takes a long time to get through, so we must begin to begin that process now, and to allow us to be able to fit in with the proposed timetable, which I think in fairness will have to slip from the original go live date of October the 1st. I think we will not be expecting the go live date to be October the 1st. It will be a couple of months beyond that, perhaps towards the end of the year. We also need to look at the admission of the ADM into the Gwent pension scheme. Again, it's a process which needs to begin well in advance, so that is another area that we will be going through. And of course, we need to start the 2P consultation with staff, and this would be going on during the summer recess. So we have a number of points where this report will cover, but they are all there. There's lots in the report, even more in the appendices, but I would ask members to consider them and approve those recommendations that I've just summarised.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for taking us through that. There's a lot of things to consider here, and also we want to make some progress. And I also acknowledge then that we, that we're probably looking more like December, I suppose, before we can actually go live. I can see your point in the recommendations point of starting work on creating a shadow company board. It's really important, I know, to have that in place. We just need to make sure that the ducks are in line. You know, there will be expectations from members at council to receive something in due course, perhaps ahead of that shadow board being formally adopted. I'd struggle to see how we can formally adopt a board before the council has made a final decision on if it's advancing things, even though we've have an executive decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it, to do all this, and even now, I'm acknowledging that we're having to do a lot of work before we've taken this formally through council, but I don't think there's any alternative way of doing it. But I would like to see, as soon as we possibly can, coming back to council for a formal decision to be made. And I don't know whether officers have any idea when that might be.
Yeah, so based on the update meeting that we had, and we as you would expect, given the pace that we need to see over the coming months and to hit the deadline that Councillor Greenland has referred to, the programme plan that we discussed at the weekly update meeting on Monday talked about a December transfer date, a decision by council in October.
I see, right, okay.
So those are the dates that have been targeted, as you can imagine, and it's been described by Councillor Greenland. There's a lot of work that needs to be undertaken, and I guess I'll probably just touch on the simple fact that quite a number of the recommendations look to de-risk our approach and making sure some of the building blocks are quickly put in place. That includes the shadow arrangements, that includes the shell companies being set up, and obviously the lead responsibilities being put in place. Final comment I make really is just in terms of that, the statement that's made in the report around partnership. This thing moves at the pace of the slowest. So if the authority drags its heels in assisting the ADM team, then the ADM team will be slowed. Yeah. So it's incumbent on myself and Kath to work with other officers in the authority to ensure the pace is maintained.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pete. I can see how lots of these things are enabling things which have to be got in place. I think that's really important. I think when we know, we've heard from experience from other organisations how important some of these elements are. The construction of the shadow board and ultimately then the final board is quite fundamental to this being a really powerful and dynamic organisation as it goes forward. It needs to have a commercial mind, doesn't it? It needs to be run as a business and needs the right sort of people to enable that to happen. So I think, Bob, you're quite right. Identifying the right chairperson, even in a shadow, is going to be quite fundamental, because you know, the success of how this moves forward will be you know, down to a lot of the strengths that the board will bring, and the team who will be taking the operational stuff forward.
Can I just come back and say, actually, the appointment of the chairman is very important, and indeed other non-exec directors, and we are blessed in Monmouthshire in having a number of people who might well be able to take this role on, but we may not be aware of all of them. Yeah. And so perhaps a call out to members who might know of a suitable applicants within their own awards would be helpful, so that we can bring forward a list of possible directors.
Yeah. Okay, colleagues, anybody want to add further to the update? No? Okay. Any officers need to add anything further? Paul, anything you want to add?
Not really. I would imagine that when we come to the moment in time, I suspect that we will be inundated with people that want to be non-executive directors of this organisation, which needs to have a degree of commerciality, but we should never lose sight of the fact that it's been set up to advance the public interest.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's why we were agonised over the group structure that we have, and I think come up with something that is justifiably, I won't say unique, but it's certainly unusual to actually come together with a structure which combines charity, tackle and trading. You know, we have to give this organisation the best chance of being successful. Travelling in the belief that if it isn't successful, it will return to us.
Exactly.
And that's not the goal. If we wanted it to return to us, we wouldn't set it up in the first place. I think at all times we should remember this is to advance the public interest and to enable services to stay and to develop that perhaps otherwise we wouldn't be able to allow to have that future.
That's really helpful just to remind us of that, because sometimes we forget why we embark on this, is actually so that we can actually preserve locally sustainable services and maintain them in a climate where sadly we see lots of these things being eroded in other places, and that's what we don't want. So yeah, absolutely.
Leader, just on the shadow boards and the establishment of the shadow board, I think it's very akin to what happened with Monmouthshire Housing Association. If you remember the process that we went through, where we had a period where we were, if you like, in shadow before then it went live. So it's analogous to that, I think.
Yeah, good. Okay, right then. So the recommendation, I'm not going to go, Bob took us through each one individually. So the recommendations are there from 2.1 to 2.8. I'll take them on block. Are we all in favour? Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Right, let's move forward to Park Street. Now on Park Street there is a confidential item at 6AA. So if anybody, I will encourage you not to venture into that. Otherwise, if there is if we do need to move into that, I will have to move us into committee or defer this item to the end of the agenda where we have another report which will need to be put into committee. Okay, so with that, Phil, can I ask you to introduce it?
Yes, thank you, Leader, and you'll be pleased to hear that I'm stopping at 3.5. So this is relating to the Abergavenny Community Trust. You'll recall that a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, there was an application for them to see if they could make a success of the former Park Street School as a community facility, and we granted them the ability to do that. And the Abergavenny Community Trust was formed to carry that out. That has been largely successful, and it's considered a valuable resource in Abergavenny. So what we're looking to do now is to grant a 25-year lease to ACT with a 3-year lease on the former Park Street School car park. They particularly need that with a view to raising grants, and delegate the authority of the head of commercial integrated landlord services to agree the lease terms. So just to reiterate, the ACT was created to manage the building. They started operation in March 15, and the idea was for them to secure a 3-year lease and use this as a platform to generate longer term funding. The original agreement contained a clause that in the event the trust was able to secure some 230,000, a 25-year lease would automatically be entered into. But they haven't quite done that, but they have done quite, as I said earlier, quite considerable things, and it's considered that it's appropriate to give them the opportunity now of carrying on the very good work that they've been doing. They did, in fact, create circumstances where it's now a meeting venue for over 31 clubs. It's created 5 part-time roles, has 30 volunteers, has generated some £133,000 worth of income over that period. And it's fully in line with the council's aspiration to develop sustainable and resilient communities, and with the council's social justice strategy. And as I said earlier, the lease on the car park is to enable them to realise their ambitions to secure grant funding. That's it in a nutshell, Leader. A very successful experiment that is considered worthy of support, and we give them with this the opportunity of developing further.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Before they got moving, I mean, I have to take my hat off to Marion Pierce and the team around her. Marion convinced me back in 2008, I think it was, to take Park Street off the market. I know I wasn't popular amongst some quarters of the council at that time to take off the market because they wanted a shot at a community asset transfer, I think, at that point, or were actually purchasing it back at that time, and we agreed to do that the very day of it going to auction. And I'm really pleased we did that, even though at times we've doubted that this may have advanced as it has. And I give absolute credit to Marion and colleagues there for shaping that and delivering a real community asset. Many of us have been around there and seen firsthand what's going on there, the dynamics of the diversity of things which are in play there. And I'm really pleased that we've managed to bring this forward and renew their lease, and they can take things forward and secure and sustain that community facility for many years to come, because I mean, that was a real concern to Marion and team that might not be the case. So we've actually honoured that, and we wish them well. And I suppose it's really about how we then move forward and actually work even closer with them. I know, Sarah, you're very close to it.
Yeah, and just on that point, I mean, we're already doing a huge amount of work with the centre, which is why I'm so keen that we support them. And, you know, the enthusiasm and energy they have there and what they're managing to deliver for us is totally in line with our social justice principles and community development and partnership team. And Owen, as the area CPDT officer, he's doing a huge amount of work with Marion and the team. It's really positive that's going on there. I think what the opportunities here shows one is the way in which we can join a community asset like that to some of the wider service delivery of what we deliver as a council, you know, what's going on at, say, the ACE Centre and other areas, how we connect all that up to deliver a really integrated community development opportunity there. And yeah, hugely supportive of this, and thank the centre for inviting us all there. I know we've all been for a visit, and it's yeah, really exciting.
Anybody else?
Other than to say, absolutely, if you hadn't had such a dedicated group of volunteers working on this, we wouldn't be here making this decision today, and all power to them.
Yeah, no, and to as well as Marion, you know, I want to pay tribute to Doug Edwards as well, because Doug Edwards kept on at me all the time as well as others. So you know, this is something I think we're all really happy that they've perhaps proved some of us wrong and delivered something really great. So I'm going to move us straight into the recommendations then. That is to grant a 25-year lease for the former Park Street School to Abergavenny Community Trust, to grant a 3-year lease on the former Park Street School car park to Abergavenny Community Trust, and delegate authority to the Head of Commercial and Integrated Landlord Services to agree the lease terms. Are we all in favour of that? Thank you very much. Okay. And that will take us on to yes, right, now we're into the Curbcraft update. Now the first part of this report can be introduced in open session, but the second recommendation suggests that we're going to be having a confidential briefing and update, and as such that will require us to move into committee. That's correct, isn't it? But the first part of the report, Rob, can be delivered in public open session. So can I invite Brian Jones, please?
Thank you, Leader. Members will recall the Wales Audit Office report to Council in March 2017, expressing concern about the delivery of the Curbcraft scheme and in particular safeguarding. At the time, we adopted an action plan which included 6 monthly reports to CYP Select Committee, Audit Committee and Cabinet until such time as we are satisfied that appropriate controls are in place. The latest progress report went to CYP Select Committee in May, along with a presentation by the acting Curbcraft officer, Geraint Roberts. After the update and presentation, the committee was satisfied with progress and decided that further reports may be provided on an annual basis. In a minute, I'll ask Geraint to provide us with a summary of progress with the Curbcraft scheme, and I believe some improvements he's hoping to make. After the presentation, if members are satisfied, I would suggest that further reporting on progress be through the Children and Young People Select Committee, and the Cabinet will receive any further reports on the basis of any concern being expressed by a Select Committee colleague or any adjustments to the service that might require our consideration and approval.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I think before I invite Aaron in, we now need to consider moving into committee. So at that point, anybody who's watching, can I thank you for looking in? I'm sorry we have to now switch off, but can I formally move us into committee and have a seconder for that, please? Okay, we are now moving into committee.